Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. My guest today is in a big fight to get student athletes back in action in California. He is working with a lot of coaches across the state, trying to compile data from other states showing that athletics are not super spreaders or even risky situations at all. He is a father and a very well spoken and clear individual. I'm so pleased I got a chance to talk to him, and I know you're going to enjoy the episode as well. So without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, George Schramm.
Oh
That was
gosh.
not my finest moment, but we're good now. The light is red. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well.
Good, good. Thank you for coming in. So you
Yeah.
guys have a big push, a big rally this Friday.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, you say you guys, it's all over California. So I'm not sure who really started this. I know it came from the Let Them Play CA Facebook page. It's a parent-driven page in conjunction with the coaches group that Coach Walsh from Sarah and Coach Allenbaugh from De La Salle have put together. So the Let Them Play CA is the parent element of it, or the parent side of it.
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
you have a real push from a coaching and a parent, it's kind of like a united front to get kids back on the field and
Right.
back on the courts.
Yeah, it's twofold. I mean, it's the coaches side was a culmination of all the college or all the high school coaches in California, as well as getting data from some of the coaches in other states. But the goal there is to really get everyone together and compile data, because that's what they're after, or we're after. We're after compiling data from all the California schools and then all the other states who have played. And then the Let Them Play CA has kind of jumped on together with us for the parent side of it.
How many states in the lower 48? I say that my dad lives in Alaska,
Yeah.
so I always refer to the lower 48.
Sure.
How many states are still not letting students play? I mean, we're talking you have a son that plays football. I mean,
Right.
obviously I assume Texas is playing and
Texas will play no matter what.
Yeah, right.
I mean, this country could be on fire, and they're going to play Texas. They're going to play football for sure. I know it was, I don't know the exact number, but it was 40 plus schools did participate in football that I know of, as well as some other sports. I think it's maybe down to 3 states that have not. So we're in the minority by a long shot.
yeah, man, no
Yeah,
kidding.
it's
no
tough.
kidding. That
Really
sounds
tough.
extremely tough.
Yeah.
As far as you were talking about data,
Mm-hmm.
right? And let's set aside the tough part for a second, but
Right.
let's talk specifically about what you're finding from these other people, because one very important point that keeps getting brought up is because we are, the United States and there are 50
Right.
of us, we get to do different things, which
Right.
is cool because it's always an ongoing experiment
Mm-hmm.
and we can evolve. So what have other states seen as far as spreading, as far as damage to the health of the community? What's happening?
Right. So are you talking outside of California?
Well, yeah, because California doesn't really count as an experiment as far as, look, we took this action and this was the result.
Right.
We only have, hey, we're not taking any of these actions for fear of a negative result.
Right.
Right now, if that negative result is happening, I mean, it's very similar to like the legalizing marijuana. And
Sure.
I'm not a user or a huge fan. Regardless, we get to see what happens in other states,
Right,
and
right.
then the states that still have it illegal can say, okay, well, this was a good result or
This
a
is
bad
what it was,
result,
yeah.
but this is actually what happens.
That is the one nice thing about our situation is we do have case studies all over the country of the states and the schools that have executed it safely, because that's really what we're after. We're not just saying let us play safely. Like, we know that this is real. This is not really an argument that we don't believe that the virus is a real virus or anything like that. We just know that there is a way to do it safely, and we have the roadmap from all these other states. To give you a few examples, the University of Wisconsin, they had a study of over 30,000 student athletes, which compiled about 16,000 practices, 4,000 games. Their findings were 271 cases of COVID, 0 hospitalizations or deaths. Here's the interesting part of this study. Of those 271 cases reported, one of them was from sports. Every single one was from something else outside. Then you have the Connecticut State High School Sports Study. Oh, I'm sorry, that was Wisconsin. So Connecticut, 30,000 student athletes, over 33,000 practices and games, 7 positive tests, which is 0.021%.
7 positive tests total.
Total. Out of 30,000 student athletes, 33,000 practices and games in Connecticut.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the numbers are staggering. They even, and you said outside of California, but there is one good study in Southern California, Surf Cup Soccer, which did have a season, and they had 6,500 athletes, 250 coaches, 143,000 sessions, 15 cases, 0.01. And 0 of those confirmed cases were attributed to the soccer activities that they were doing, all outside of the sport itself. And the reason you're getting these kind of findings where, number one, there's very few cases, because as we all know, no one really argues with the fact that the kids are not at risk really for this virus.
Right.
So that's not so surprising. But the reason that all the majority or all of the positive test cases that are found happen off the field, outside of practice, it's because these coaches are smart and they're taking safety precautions. They're wearing masks when they should be wearing masks. They're cleaning equipment when it needs to be cleaned. They're maintaining distance when they're able to. The practices and games are adhering more towards the safety guidelines than the athletes in their normal daily life. That's the interesting part about this. And it gets me, when we had conditioning, when conditioning practice was allowed here in the state, and because I coach at Monte Vista, and those conditioning practices, we had very strict guidelines and safety protocols that we followed. Very, very safe. The kids were never really in risk because we were so diligent about these safety guidelines. Then the county or state killed it. They stopped it, said no more. You guys have to stop your conditioning practices, which we did. I'm not kidding you. The very next day, I drove by a park and I saw a group of my athletes practicing with themselves with no guidelines, no safety precautions. They were sharing drinking bottles. No one had a mask on, 0 social distancing. And I sat there and I said, our practices were so safe and so secure and adhered to guidelines, perfectly. We were keeping our kids safer by actually having practice than if you stop the practice and let these kids go practice on their own, which they are doing. I mean, let's be real here. These kids are not following the safety precautions. They need their coaches. They need structure. And that's what kind of gets me, is that locking out sports actually creates a more unsafe environment. Not to mention the athletes that are traveling outside the state. I mean, that's a whole nother topic. You have kids traveling all over the place in planes, hotels, practicing with other kids from other areas, playing against kids from other states, and then they're coming back here to California bringing whatever it is they grabbed on the way. So it's very frustrating, having firsthand account of how safe and secure these school practices and competitions are compared to what happens when they're locked out.
Right, and it's amazing that you brought that up. So I have a good friend. His name's Kevin Kane, and he's pretty outspoken in some of the social media arenas because he has very little kids. He's got a 7, or I believe she's 8, and an 11-year-old now.
Right. And
they were really struggling. His wife and he were just at their wits' end with how to deal with this because their kids were really freaking out.
Right.
Okay. And recently, he very thankfully has gotten his daughters in private school, and so they're going to school, and they were up like 2 hours before school started, ready to go, dressed, couldn't be more excited. But what the point he was making about this is he's kind of like, look, when we got to the breaking point where it was, okay, look, the health risk of keeping our 6 or 7 or 8-year-old at home and quarantined with no social contact is greater than the risk she has going out. So they found some play groups. They found some little play pods, essentially. And he was saying, look, we would have been safer off at school.
100%.
Because we went outside. There was no social distancing when we were playing with these people. And we needed to have this social contact. We couldn't we couldn't live like this anymore. So we did all of these things that were far riskier than having our kids in school. As soon as he got his kids in private school, he cut off the play dates because, like, you're going to get the social contact. You're going to be masked. You're going to have some semblance of distance. You're going to have regulation and structure that keeps everyone safe, and that will fill the need that we would have had to fill in a more risky way.
Right. I mean, when you have the sports opened up, I mean, now these poor kids, they've gone through hell since March. I mean, we're closing in on 1 year that sports has been taken away from them. So I noticed when we finally got back out on that field, it was more than just a practice. These kids, like, they looked at it like a gift, and they valued it so much, and they were not going to do anything to screw it up. So hopefully they will open sports back up again. No one's going to risk it by going rogue and not following safety precautions. Everyone is going to be very, very careful and safe about it. And again, we know how to do it. We have the roadmap from the other states. We have the data. So I'm praying and hoping that the Department of Health or the governor's office or the governor himself will at least give us the opportunity to go and present this data to them. We're not coming from a position of, we don't want to challenge them or get into a fight or anything like that. We want to be able to have our voice heard, to present this data to the powers that be, to get them to understand where we're coming from and how important this is to get kids back out on the field and on the court. And we're just the most important part is we're running out of time. Like, we don't have 3 months to go through this. There's a very short window for a few sports that have to be played, or else you get a whole class where their future is, I mean, it's grim.
Well, let me ask you something. So a lot of people are talking about students with their formative years, like your first, second, third grade. They're like, look, if you don't engage somebody academically in their first couple years, then you really run the risk of just not getting that spark going with them. They don't understand value. They're not having a good time with it. And later on, when you're dealing with a high schooler, I think a lot of people just kind of consider, all right, well, look, we can patch this up with summer school. Like the concept of a shelf life for a high schooler from an academic standpoint doesn't really exist. They're like, look, we can do online prep. We can, we can fix this later on. But it's not really like that with athletes.
No. I mean, athletes have a short window depending on their age, school grade, and sport. And not to mention, just not to jump off topic here, but you talk about online schooling. I want to make sure that everyone understands these two topics are totally separate.
Right.
They're completely separate. One can happen without the other. You don't need to be in full-time school to be able to have athletics as a go. I would even go out to say that if we continue to stay in online schooling or remote learning, that athletics is even more important, because they're missing that social interaction from being in school. They're zombies in front of computers all day. All the more reason to have an outlet with extracurricular activities. And I'm not even saying just sports either. I mean, band. I mean, anything extracurricular to get these kids away from their computers. But back to what you were saying about shelf life. Yeah, I mean, look at a high school senior. I'm thinking of one off the top of my head right now, Josh Zeising, who is a senior linebacker at Monte Vista. He had a very, very good junior year. He had over 100 tackles. Schools were starting to notice him, as they should. They all said, we can't wait to see your senior footage.
God, man.
So Josh, who is an amazing kid and a great player, he worked his tail off the entire offseason. He was up at 4 a.m. working out at Crunch and Blackhawk. He would then later in the day go to speed training. I mean, we are talking months and months and months preparing for this, I guess you could say, final interview, right? They all said, we want to see your senior film. Josh is just sitting on his hands right now. He's got nothing to give them. And all he does all day long is scroll through Twitter and watch all these other athletes in other states with their offers and commitments and videos of state championships. And, there's a million Joshes out there in the state, and my heart breaks for all of them. And like I said, the clock is ticking fast for those guys. I mean, my son's a junior. Yes, I would like him to have a junior year. It is hurting him not having a junior year. But these seniors, I mean, these seniors that have to get on that field, their future is drastically being affected by this.
Right. And just to come back to something you said a second ago about, look, if we stay in remote learning, it takes a little bit of the pressure off for a certain population of people. It's like, look, let me go out and do these sports.
Right.
I will engage in a safer type of socializing. I will get benefit out of it.
Right.
And not just immediately with high school, obviously with recruiting, but it is one of those things that I haven't really heard a lot of people say, look, okay, generally the fight is stay remote or get some kind of hybrid. But there's not a bridge coming together saying, okay, look, if you have to make us stay remote, can we have these concessions?
Right.
Like there's no negotiation, there's no compromise, which is, I think, one of the reasons why tensions are getting, higher and higher, and people are getting more and more heated, because there's no give and take. It's an all or nothing kind of thing. But I think it would be a great thing if people said, okay, look, we're going to bite the bullet on this. Nobody's going to be happy. We're going to stay distance for the rest of the year. Okay, for the rest of the academic year until June, but we're going to help you with these things.
Right.
Just like throw me a bone or something. And again, that would take pressure off.
Yeah. Well, I will say, the good thing, it's hard to even find a good thing in our current situation here, but several months ago, I did talk to Dr. Malloy at the school district, and he did assure me that the two are completely separate. That online school or fully remote, hybrid, whatever, has absolutely nothing to do with athletics. Now, I know logically that doesn't make sense. Like, how would you allow a football game to happen, but you won't let a kid sit in math class? Doesn't make much sense logically, and I appreciate that. But thankfully, they are two separate issues. He basically confirmed for me and everyone else on the call that if the CIF and the state say it is okay to go play football, for instance, it does not matter if the school is fully remote, hybrid, or all in person. The two have nothing to do with each other. So I guess you can look at that as a positive in that athletics doesn't have two fights. They don't have to fight the school and fight the athletic piece. We're just fighting the athletic piece. So I'm looking at that as a positive.
Yeah, okay. I don't think you want to join in on the school fight.
No.
That's getting a little dicey.
No, they're two separate things, thankfully. But again, like I said before, we are going full remote, and I see us potentially going full remote in 21 or in the fall in 21. It wouldn't shock me one bit if we stayed remote.
Oh my gosh.
So,
man.
the importance for extracurricular, I think, is 10 times more important if we are once again forcing our kids, to stay in front of a computer. Let them, at 3:30, let them go to practice. Let them get out see their friends, get out, be active.
What happens to Josh? What happens to this guy? He's a senior. He's killed himself, right? Because to get to the point where you could be recruited by a D1 program,
right,
in any sport, to get to that point, you have crushed since you can remember, essentially. You've been doing some sport since you were like 4 or 5 or earlier.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the guys like Josh, they've been practicing their craft and honing their craft for over a decade, waiting for this exact moment in their life. And this is like I said, this is like the final interview. And they've done everything that they've been asked to do and should do. And the final interview is getting pulled from them. So I will tell you what happens to guys like Josh. You're going to get a section of kids that will probably go to a JC, most likely. Get out of state, go to a JC, get some film there, and hopefully get picked up at the school you want to go to after a year. That's what a lot of kids are going to have to do. The part that scares me is the kids who do not have the financial means to go to a JC, or to go, not JC, but they don't have the financial means to go to a college, period, without athletics. There was a prominent NFL wide receiver, I can't think of his name, James Jones, put out a beautiful YouTube video today, and he talked about himself in high school being homeless at one point, sleeping, in a tent under an overpass, and high school sports was the only thing that, gave him purpose in life, and he was able to go on and do all the things he did, 9-10 years in the NFL. And he was basically saying, like, there is a kid like me out there right now that will not have the opportunity to go to college if it isn't for football or baseball or basketball. He was basically begging the city or the state of California to let these kids play, because there is that batch of kids. If it doesn't happen, their future is completely different. I personally played with guys in college who, if they did not have football, they wouldn't have been there at all. Some of those guys went on and had NFL careers. Others have great jobs, great careers, families, the whole bit. If their senior or junior year was ripped away from them, they never would have played college football with me. Not without saying names, I can think of easily 10 guys right now that without sports, they would not be where they are today.
Right.
And, I'm a hopeful, from what I'm told, Newsom was an athlete. I think he.
Come on now, bro.
I heard that I want to say it was
Does
baseball.
he even lift, bro? Come on.
Someone told me that he was an athlete. I think he played baseball and went pretty far in it. So he understands the importance. We just got to get it done. We have to get these kids back out on the field now.
What do you think is the biggest thing holding them back? Because it sounds like you have an enormous amount of data, right? Like we have these essentially large case studies that are saying that it's a safer organization, it's a safer engagement. The other states that have done it have not found any evidence that people were harmed. What do you think is the biggest thing holding the athletes back at this point?
We haven't had that platform to present it yet. So I don't even know if they're looking at that data, to be totally honest with you. I really don't. If I'm making assumptions, I think their view is a little bit narrow. But that's the whole point of what Coach Walsh and Allenbaugh are trying to do, is they are trying to get this data so we can put it in front of them and have a conversation with them about it. When that data gets presented to you, it's a pretty good case. It'll make it very hard to say no. I mean, that data is real. But the only thing I can assume is that they are not seeing that data, because anyone who would see it would make a change. These tier systems that they have come up with for sports, many of them are unattainable. I mean, there's been countless health officials, just for an example, that have said there's no reason for us to believe, or no study or science that says that this can be transmitted through water. So, swimming, diving, all those water sports should actually be going on right now. Right. Based on what scientists are saying. They keep telling us to listen to the science, right? How long have we heard that during this whole pandemic? Well, the science is telling us sports don't contribute to this virus or transmissions of it. The kids are at low risk. So it's just we got to get them to look at this data and change the plan, or change the tiers. Like I said, some of those tiers are impossible. We're not going to get there for over a year.
Right.
So, and like I said before, time is not on our side. So I'm hopeful that we do get the platform or the opportunity to put this data that we're still compiling, by the way. We're building this data every single day. We have coaches from all over the place happy to share their data with us, which every coach had to keep records of all this when we started doing conditioning. We had to keep records of how many kids. We had to take roll attendance and all that stuff. If someone got COVID or transmitted it, we had to report it. So we have all this data at our fingertips. So I'm just praying that they at least give us the opportunity to present it to them.
Right. So the rally this Friday, then, is that just to organize and help the community kind of at large understand, look, this is what we're going for. Yeah. This is where we are. Like, this is what we're trying to present to the higher ups.
Here's my take on the rally. Number one, I want to be very clear. Those rallies are not school sponsored. Those are 100% sponsored and driven by the parents. We've communicated to everyone to keep that in mind, to stay off the campuses. I'm not organizing this rally. I just... here's my take on that, and I love that they're doing this across the state.
And by the way, I just want to be clear. I'm not trying to pin the rally on you.
No.
I just know that you're working in parallel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're working through one path, and then the parents are trying to work in another path.
Yeah, and the only reason I wanted to say that I'm not organizing the rallies because ever since it started, my phone's been blowing up with people thinking I'm the organizer. I'm really not. I'm not.
Half of them love you. Half of them are cursing at you.
Right.
Damn you, George.
Exactly. But the point of the rally is, the high school athlete has had the quietest voice during this whole thing. You have professional athletes and college athletes, very vocal. Their voices are heard, probably because there's money involved in that. But the high school athlete has been stifled. They've been good. The high school athlete has been following the rules without complaint since last March. Can't go, your season canceled, can't do this, can't do that. They have done everything they've been asked to do and then some, but no one is listening to them. No one's hearing their plea. So this Let Them Play CA Facebook page driven by the parents and this rally, the whole point of this is to finally give these kids a voice, because they haven't had one. And we don't want to see another story of a suicide. We've seen a couple. We've seen a couple across the country, and now we're seeing them here in California. The CDC had even reported that obesity, depression, anxiety, and suicides are all up with kids. So another data point that no one can really refute or argue. So,
but nobody really wants to talk about either.
No one wants to talk about it. It's not something that, anyone's really going to talk about or give voice to. I mean, I'm not going to say names or anything, but there was a local kid who committed suicide, and he was an athlete, and it was quiet about it. Yeah. And I said, why isn't this all over the place? We do not want another story like this. Please send this story all over the place. So if there's another kid feeling like that, we can let him know that's not an option. Don't, talk to your teammates and your coaches. And that's what I think these rallies are intended. It's to show the governor and the state and the health officials that these students have a voice, and they're hurting, and they're crying for attention. They're crying to be heard. And that's what the rallies are for. They're obviously supposed to be extremely peaceful at all, completely peaceful.
Right.
They've all been instructed to follow the guidelines, wear masks, 6 feet distance. No one at these rallies is there trying to protest. In my opinion, I don't think they're there to protest anything. They just want to be heard. They want to say, hey, this is a real issue. Someone listen to me, is what those rallies are for, in my opinion.
Well, here's something that, people understand scholarships. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
People understand money pretty easily. Mm-hmm. I work with tons of student athletes, but one situation in particular from years back, this girl wanted to go to St. Mary's. She wanted to play volleyball, and her mom got a hold of me and she said, "Look, this girl's a senior. Okay, she's already been accepted. If we can up her test scores by, it was like 3 or 4 points, and we only had a month, so we had to jam. But she said, if we can do this, we get something. It was like a $15,000 or $16,000 automatically recurring scholarship for 4 years. Mm-hmm. So we got after it. We got it, which was great. Got whatever increase she needed, but it was the kind of thing where this mom was telling me, she says, "Look, if we don't get this scholarship, honestly, I'm gonna have to get like a second job." And it's not like the family was neglecting this, right? Throughout this kid's life. They were saving for college and stuff, but they also knew that the college she wanted to go to was a private school, and it was a very specific thing, and it was going to have this massive impact on the parents' financial health and ability over the course of these 4 years. And so when you have parents out here that are at a rally that are asking, "Hey, help my kid," you're also helping the economic stability of a large portion of parents of student athletes, right? They've made these investments in their kid, and not entirely selfishly. It's not like the parents were helping the kid with lacrosse or football just for the parents' financial standpoint, right? Obviously, the kids have to have a passion for it, but you're talking about an enormous chunk of money that's going to evaporate from potential scholarships, and that could obviously damage the community. That people sell their houses or move all the time to help pay for the tuition of college.
Right. Oh, you talk about moving. Right. I'm in real estate. I'm in the mortgage business, and there's people moving out of this state all like crazy right now.
God, that's unbelievable.
And
that's unconscionable.
It's horrible, and a lot of them are due to sports. There was a lot last year. A bunch went to Utah. Several went to Arizona. I know 2 that went to Florida. So you are getting people who are definitely leaving the state because they can't continue to wait and continue to kick the can down the road. We did that. We tried that. Myself personally, I'm a little worried about waiting too long. You try to have confidence in your state that they will get it figured out and we'll get our kids back where they should be, and you keep waiting and waiting and waiting. I mean, it almost would have been better back in July or August if they said, we're done, completely canceled.
Right.
Then people could have done things. But instead it was like, well, let's reassess in a month. Let's go 2 weeks from now.
Right.
Well, let's wait until we get here. I mean, to give you an example, the tier that football is allowed to play in, that they have said now, we were there in September. We could have played, but they said no. Our numbers were great. Whatever month that was in the year, the COVID numbers were very low. So if we would have played back then, like 90% of the country did, we wouldn't be in this situation.
Right. So
it's frustrating. And you talk about parents and the financial investments they've made in their kids athletically up until this point. Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid to do the math on the amount of money I've spent on my kid because he plays a sport that travels, and yeah, it's a lot.
And I can't imagine that through your son's childhood, you were looking at this like, well, I'll get this $10,000 back, right? Like, it's not. It's likely never like that or that calculated.
No,
but you do know. I mean, I think everybody knows. And again, I was a college athlete. I was not on a scholarship, and you were a college athlete. And again, one of my best friends was a football player at UOP back when they had a football team.
Yep.
And he grew up in East LA. He was like, look, man, if I didn't smash my helmet against somebody as hard as I could, I was going to stay in East LA.
Yes.
And that was his out. But even if you could go to college, you're going to have a completely different college experience.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, for instance, anybody can go to DVC for the first year in Contra Costa County. Shout out DVC, by the way, free tuition for the first year. So you can go there, but there are all kinds of risks with that, okay? And you mentioned that earlier, and I think that's a wonderful thing that people have JC options, but there are pitfalls and dangers with a JC. Specifically, okay, when I went to Cal, okay, I did not have a fantastic first year, and the myriad of reasons. I didn't have family support, and I kind of eked through, but I struggled, okay? And halfway through my sophomore year, crushed it. Figured it out, and then smooth sailing from then on.
Right.
All right. Great GPAs, and I was great. But if I had gone to a JC and had that same first year experience, I do not think I would have been able to get into Cal. So you have to recognize going straight to a 4-year college offers you a little bit of cushion where it's kind of like, okay, look, we've accepted you. If you stumble a little bit, we're not happy, but you're not out. Right, like you don't have to reapply at the end of your first year. If students go to a junior college and they have an experience like I had, where I didn't perform as well as I could, that will absolutely change their ability to go forward. So it's not just monetary. Yes, we could all say, well, look, you could go to a JC your first year or first 2 years, and it's very cheap, so stop whining about the scholarship. It's like, yeah, but look, if you look at me in my last 2 years, had almost a 4.0, crushing it academically. I was tutoring. I was on the rowing team as well. You would look at that person and say, that's a contributor. That's somebody who benefited from the university, and the university benefited from them.
Right.
Well, you have to be prepared to yank that person if you want to send them to a JC, or at least some number of those people that could end up being contributors, but might need just a little bit more cushion. You don't have that cushion at a JC.
No, and and I've seen they're definitely not downplaying the benefit of the JC. Like you said,
they're great. They're great.
It's phenomenal. But yes, I mean, I've had friends that were great athletes and went the JC route, and it didn't work out. They weren't motivated. It wasn't the same. They saw all their other teammates at 4 years, kind of going on their path, and there's a lot of kids that fizzle out when they go the JC route. Not everybody, but it's. I'm glad that the JC route is there for these kids, but when it shouldn't be an option for like the Joshes of the world, he shouldn't have to do that. He deserves better than that. He's earned better than that. We got to give those kids their season. It's not okay to say, oh well, no big deal, go JC. Like, yeah, this situation's terrible. So sorry, you're not going to get to go to Cal or Stanford or whatever because you don't have film. So go to JC. That's just not okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it would be a fair argument if you said, "Hey, look, you are in the most risky sport. Like I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, so I literally have to wrestle around with people. I haven't been able to do that,
Right.
and it is not something that I've managed well because I've been doing it for over a decade. I rely on that for my life. Right? That's just I need that for my person, and my wife, God bless her, she's like, look, man, I mean, I can't see past being okay with this. And as frustrating as it is, I have to understand it. It's like, look, this is the most exposed I could be to somebody.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I get that.
Right.
If there was an argument where it's like, hey, look, athletes, you are engaging in by far the most risky, most transmission prone experience, that would be something. But that's not the experience. Right? No. If they had to pass up Stanford, they had to pass up Cal, they had to go the JC route because they're like, look, it's just too dangerous.
Right.
I could see that. But that's not what's happening. They're getting passed up when we know very clearly from hundreds of thousands of athletes and unbelievable numbers of games and interactions that this is not a spreading situation.
It's not happening. It's not happening. And again, it's, I want to make the point clear that we are not asking to go back to life as normal. We're not saying, we're going to go in the locker room and jump on the team bus and, just do it the way we used to do it. We know that if and when we are allowed to go back, it's going to be modified. We are going to do it safely. Like, I think that's the message that maybe is not getting out. We're not asking for life as normal. Right. It's give us the opportunity to perform safely based on our current situation. We're responsible individuals. These coaches are diligent when it comes to safety protocols. I already had a conversation with my son months ago. I'm like, hey, if we go back to football, forget the locker room. It's not going to happen. Forget the team bus riding to and from games. They're not going to allow that. Here's the thing. The kids don't care. The kids will do anything to get on the field.
Oh my gosh,
I mean, if you said we're changing your uniforms to, pink and chartreuse or something like that, they do it. Like, they do not care.
I love that you said chartreuse, by the way. That's fantastic.
I was trying to think of the most non-football, color I could come up with. That's what I came up with. But my point is that we're not asking to go back to life as normal because we understand that our current situation is anything but normal. We get that. And I know a lot of the outliers look at guys like me and people like me and, meathead football players just want to go play football.
Those people are just ignorant.
Yeah.
That just boils my blood.
And that's okay. It's okay. We've dealt with that our whole lives in the sport that we chose. But the point has to get across that we want to go back, yes, but we want to go back in a safe way. Give us the opportunity to go back safely. These safety protocols that I talked about that these coaches are putting into practice, they're good. I mean, when we were doing the practices and I was working the sled with the D linemen, they would hit the sled, and after every single guy, I had to get a wet cloth or whatever, and I had to wipe down the sled in between reps. Now, in my head, I thought that was ridiculous. Personally, I thought that was stupid. But if that's what it took to get my players on the field and me coaching them, I had no problem with it.
All day long.
All day long.
All day.
So that's all that we're asking is these officials and the state and the governor allow us to execute safely because we know how to do it.
Right.
It's not a mystery anymore. I will say that to kind of give them not a pass, but I understand where they were coming from in the beginning stages of this. It was all brand new. No one knew.
Right.
So any decisions that were made in the summer or even, August, whether they were right or wrong, I don't really fault them because it was new. But now that we have this clear roadmap and how these other states and other schools have done it successfully, I can't fathom why they won't let us follow that roadmap.
Right.
For the benefit of our kids. Like I said before, I don't want to see another suicide. I mean, I cannot read another one of those articles. I don't want to see the Josh Zeisings of the world have zero football opportunity. I'm praying that somehow, some way, and hopefully this let them play CA and the rally and what Coach Walsh and Allen Ball are doing with the Golden State coaches group. Hopefully this is enough to at least get us that appointment.
Right.
Get us that date on the calendar where we can sit down with them and say, look, here's what we have.
Just give me an audience.
Just give me an audience. That's
Right.
it. It's the least, these kids have done so much. Like I said before, they have done everything they're asked for. At least give us that opportunity to present to you the data points that we have found.
Right.
And to tell you how we can execute it safely. Just give us that chance. That's really all that we're after.
Right. And I think for a lot of people, when they think of a football team, they think of, like 50 guys or 60 guys and all of this mixing and intermingling. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there are ways that you can organize practice. So you essentially break up the team into smaller, manageable pods. So
Right.
instead of it being like a domino, one guy goes, the whole thing goes, it can be like a much more effective Titanic.
Yeah.
Where it's like the Titanic was supposed to have these little sections that,
Right.
if one went, then they were okay. Everyone else could float. That's the thing. You can break the football team, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, into separate pods.
Correct.
That don't intermingle, that have staggered practices, that if one of the pods gets sick or needs to quarantine, the other 4 or 5 pods can function independently and
Right.
still keep going. And in that way, you minimize and mitigate the classic kind of mingling and risk that you would have with a football.
Right. And that was part of the guidelines that they laid out for us when they okayed conditioning practice. We were in pods.
Right.
And it was exactly what you said. It was the same group of kids with the same coach every single day. If a coach couldn't make practice, those kids didn't practice. So you were with the same people every single day.
So in effect, you had micro football teams.
Yeah, it was like mini bubbles.
Yeah, right.
That's what it was. It was mini bubbles. And and let's some people will say, well, they're kids, they're going to break the rules and all that stuff. You're right, and they did. But we cracked the whip on them. I mean, there were times when we would lead them down to the field and they got too close to each other in line, and I had to stop everyone and yell at them. And I'd say, do you guys want football or do you not? And, obviously we want football, coach. I'm like, well, then spread out. So again, this kind of goes back to the point that the coaches create a safe environment compared to locking it down and letting the kids go off on their own, which is completely unsafe.
Right.
So, again, I'm hopeful that we're able to have this conversation with them.
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, listen, I know you got a lot of work to do. I really appreciate you swinging by and chatting with me today. Is there anything else that people can do locally, like for the parents hearing this, or the people that are sympathetic that don't even have kids but understand the value to the community? Right. What can they do?
The easiest thing you can do is get on Facebook and join the Let Them Play CA Facebook page. There's also a page that I run that's Allow High School Football in 2020, which I now have to update to 21. Hopefully I won't have to change it to 22. But the Let Them Play CA page is the best landing page for the parents. I would say as you hear of these rallies going on in your town, attend them. But attend them correctly, peacefully, with a mask, social distancing, and support your community, support your athletes, even if you don't have one in the house. Give them a bigger voice. So that's the best thing the parents can do. And I will say, any parent that is listening that has an athlete, ask them how they're doing. I'm sure that these kids that have, unfortunately committed suicide, I'm sure their parents thought their kids were fine and everything was good. So I know when I heard those stories, I grabbed my son and I'm just like, hey, how's everything going? So that's the only thing I would encourage parents to do is just ask them how they're doing, because they're not doing good. Even the ones that say they are, these athletes, they're not doing good at all.
Right. And I think a darker reality for a lot of parents is to know their kids aren't doing good and not have an option.
Right. Exactly.
Which I think should be avoided at all costs. Well, again, George, thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And man, anything we can do to help, you just let me know.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.